but are different measures. 4 degrees. It's very simple to find coterminal angles. I kind of did that, or you probably thought in your mind what I was doing. You simply add or subtract 360 degrees. You can do this multiple times, like I did in that last example. 0 degrees and 720. 0 plus 360 plus 360. I could have even added another 360. All right? For radians, well, by the way, what's 360 degrees equivalent to in radians? 2 pi. So instead of adding or subtracting, if I give you an angle in radians, instead of adding or subtracting 360, you're going to add or subtract 2 pi. You could do 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi, etc. All right? So the way you find all coterminal angles in degrees is you take your angle measurement, which I call theta. You can add or subtract 360 degrees times k. And k is just any integer. So for example, that is a generalization. Because like I said, it is impossible to find all coterminal angles. So if I ask you to find all coterminal angles, yes, it's a trick question. You've got to write this generalization. For example, if my angle is 30 degrees, it would be 30 degrees plus or minus 360 times k. K could be 1, k could be 2, k could be 3, k could be 4. So you're taking 360, multiplying it by 1, 360, multiplying it by 2, 360, multiplying by 3, etc. That's what that k represents. In radians, instead of 360, it's going to be plus or minus 2 pi k, because you add or subtract 2 pi. So like I said, for example, if I ask you to sketch a 30-degree angle, let's suppose this angle is 30 degrees. To find all your coterminal angles, it would be 30 degrees plus or minus 360 degrees times k. That's the only way you can find all coterminal angles. If I asked you to find just one, then you could just simply add 360 to 30 or subtract 360 from 30. All right? So let's take a look at examples. So again, find one positive, and typically they're going to ask you to find one positive and one negative coterminal angle. And I want this angle to be between 0 and 360. So sometimes you may have to subtract 360 more than once, or you may have to add 360 more than once, because the directions are saying I want the coterminal angles between 0 and 360. All right? So 0 degrees. So coterminal angle. Now this angle is already between 0 and 360. So the coterminal angle is not going to be between 0 and 360. So if I add 360 to 0, what's one positive coterminal angle going to be? 360. What's the negative one going to be? Negative 360. So to find your positive, all I'm going to do for 60 degrees is take 360 and add 60 degrees to it. What's 360 plus 60? It's going to be 420. To find my negative, I'm going to take 60 degrees and I'm going to subtract 360 from it. It's going to be negative what? 300. So there's your positive and negative. So any questions on how you find your positive or negative coterminal angles? Now in number 3, I've got a radians. So instead of adding and subtracting 360, what am I going to add or subtract? 2 pi. Now again, you have to add and subtract fractions. What's the denominator I'm going to be adding and subtracting? I'm adding and subtracting with a denominator of 4. So what you want to do is rewrite 2 pi with a denominator of 4. So what's 2 pi equivalent to with a denominator of 4? 8 pi. So instead of adding and subtracting 2 pi, you want to just rewrite 2 pi as 8 pi over 4. So then 7 pi over 4 plus 8 pi over 4 gives me what? 15 pi over 4. There's your positive coterminal angle. 7 pi over 4 minus 8 pi over 4 is going to give you what? Negative pi over 4. So there's your positive and your negative. now notice 880 degrees. It's not between 0 and 2 pi. So what we're going to do is we're going to start subtracting 360. What's 880 minus 360? 520. Is 520 degrees between 0 and 360? No. So subtract 360 again. It's going to be 160. So there's your positive coterminal angle between 0 and 360. So 160 degrees, if you were to sketch it, would be in exactly the same location as 880 degrees, but with 2 revolutions around. All right, so that's basically what you just found. Where is 160 degrees located? What quadrant over 160? 2. So we know pretty easily where 160 is located right there. Now, pretty easily, hopefully, you can sketch 880. Because you know you're going to have to make 1 revolution around, because we took away 1 360. We have to go around again. We took away another 360, and then you go around another 160 degrees. All right? So any questions on that one? Now, you still have to give me a negative. So what are we going to have to do with 160? We're going to have to subtract what again? Subtract another 360. So if I subtract another 360 from 160, what's that going to give me? Negative 200 degrees. So negative 200 degrees and 160 degrees are your coterminal angles. When you're doing coterminal angles, you want to find the angles between 0 and 360 or 0 and 2 pi if you're given an angle that's not between 0 and 360 and 0 and 2 pi. Okay? So any questions on that? Let's take a look at 7 pi over 6. So it's in radians, so what are we going to add and subtract to this? We're going to add and subtract what? 2 pi. Now, and again, change this denominator. I know I'm going to be adding and subtracting to 7 pi over 6, so let me change 2 pi into a denominator of 6. It's going to be 12 pi over 6. So when I add 12 pi over 6 to 7 pi over 6, that's going to give me what? 19 pi over 6. And then when I take 7 pi over 6 and subtract 12 pi over 6, that's going to give me what? Negative 5 pi over 6. So there's my 2 coterminal angles. Negative 415 degrees. I don't want to subtract 360. Add 360, exactly. So when I add 360, what's that going to give me? What's negative 415 plus 360? It's going to be what? Negative 55 degrees. Remember, I want 1 positive and 1 negative. So to find my positive, what am I going to do to negative 55 again? I'm going to do what? Add 360. So negative 55 degrees plus 360 is going to give me what? 305 degrees. So 305 degrees and negative 55 degrees. So any questions on how I'm finding these positive? Are there other answers out there? Absolutely. Remember what I said. There's an infinite number of coterminal angles you can find for each angle. The directions are specifically saying, however, if the angle's not between 0 and 2 pi that's given or 0 and 360, make sure you give me a coterminal angle that's between 0 and 360 and 0 and 2 pi. Yes, Tim? No, it's impossible. It's impossible to. Not for the negatives, yeah. Yeah. What I'm saying, though, is negative 415. You want to find the smallest possible coterminal angles as possible. Okay? You guys go ahead and try number 7 for me. Negative 11 pi over 4. What are we going to add or subtract to negative 11 pi over 4? We're going to do what? Change that 2 pi into a denominator of 4. So what's 2 pi going to look like with a denominator of 4? 8 pi over 4. Am I going to want to subtract 8 pi over 4? No, just add that 8 pi over 4. Hopefully you guys came up with negative 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4 as the coterminal angles for number 7. All right, any questions on finding coterminal angles, whether you are in radians or whether you're in degrees? All right, let's do a couple examples here. This is just doing some sketching. So So they want me to find and draw one positive and one negative coterminal angle with a given angle. And notice they also want you to find all angles. So that's where when they ask you to find all angles, you want that generalization. So let's do the generalization first. It's impossible, ladies and gentlemen, remember, to list all coterminal angles. It's impossible. So in degrees, remember, to find all angles, it's going to be 70 degrees plus or minus that 360 degrees times k. It's impossible to list them all, because I could take 360 and multiply by 1,000,000 and find another coterminal angle and add that to 70 degrees. It's impossible. So to find a positive coterminal, remember, I'm going to add 360 to 70. And what's 360 degrees plus 70? 430. The negative, I'm going to take 70 degrees and subtract 360 degrees. And what's that going to give me? It's going to give me negative 290. So there's my positive, there's my negative. What quadrant, by the way, is 70 degrees located? 1. So remember how we sketch angles? You showed me the initial and terminal side. So there's 70 degrees. So now, to show you where 430 degrees, notice if I make one revolution around, that's 360. And then I go another 70 degrees. That puts me in exactly the same location as where 70 degrees is located. 430 and 70 degrees share that same initial and terminal side. It's just one revolution around. So there's 430 degrees. Remember, when you sketch negative angles, you go in the clockwise direction. So negative 290 is located right there. So notice when you sketch negative 290, it puts you in exactly the same location as 70 degrees. Okay? So let's just do negative 5 pi over 3. First of all, let's find all angles. So remember, to find all angles, I take negative pi over 3. Now I'm not adding and subtracting 360 because this is radians. I'm adding and subtracting what? 2 pi k. So anytime I ask you to find all coterminal angles, it's impossible to list them all. You've got to make the generalization. The positive coterminal angles. Well, first of all, I know I'm going to add or subtract 2 pi, but what's 2 pi equivalent to with a denominator of 3? 6 pi over 3. So I'm going to take negative 5 pi over 3 and add 6 pi over 3. So when I add those together, what's that going to give me? Pi over 3. To find my negative coterminal angles, I have to take negative 5 pi over 3 and subtract 6 pi over 3. And what's that going to give me? Negative 11 pi over 3. So I know that all three of these angles, the one that's given, the two that I found, are going to share my same initial and terminal side. What's the easiest one of these three to sketch? Pi over 3. What quadrant is pi over 3 located? 1. So this is pi over 3. Well then, when you sketch negative 5 pi over 3, I know it has to be in this direction. So by being able to find positive and negative coterminal angles, if I give you guys angles that are larger than 2 pi or larger than 360, or smaller on the negative side, angles that are smaller than negative 360, or angles that are smaller than negative 2 pi, it's going to make sketching angles a lot easier. Because just keep on adding and subtracting that 360, because as you guys just did, when I asked you which one of these three is the easiest to sketch, you guys all knew exactly where pi over 3 is. Versus if you may have struggled, where the heck is negative 11 pi over 3 or where the heck is negative 5 pi over 3? By just adding and subtracting that 2 pi, it should hopefully make your life a little bit easier. Because again, I know that pi over 3 is right here. And then I know that negative 11 pi over 3 is just an angle with more than one revolution. It goes around, and then it goes around again, except it's going the negative way. There's your negative 11 pi over 3. So any questions on finding positive or negative coterminal